Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Kristen, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, Yuri, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, in spite of the circumstances. Where are you calling us from?
Nice. I'm calling in from Richmond, Virginia, and I agree, despite circumstances, all is well here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear everything's going well for you.
Thank you. And how have things been in general in Richmond these last few months?
Yeah, gosh, it's been crazy. I remember the day that I tried to meet someone at a Starbucks and I couldn't because there's a sign on the door saying, "Hey, we're closed." So for a little bit of time, it kind of was like a ghost town here.
Yeah.
And that was very surreal. And I think right now, Richmond as a whole, we've hunkered down for about a month and a half, and now everyone's starting to come back out. And I went kayaking last week, and there are people out on the lake, and so it's starting to come alive again, but it is something I never expected. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's safe to say that's pretty much, I think, everywhere where people didn't necessarily expect this, but yeah, it's been fairly drastic. But it's good that things are on the up and up down there.
Yeah.
So for my listeners who are less familiar with what you do, how do you describe yourself and what you do?
Yeah, great question. So I am formerly a classical ballerina, danced professionally for 5 years, and I made a pivot back in 2017 to go into social entrepreneurship. And so I do have a corporate gig that takes care of me and pays my bills as my business has been building. And that business now has grown very well, and we're starting to expand and move into a point of being able to coach and mentor other young entrepreneurs as well. So I would say I describe myself as a ballerina entrepreneur.
That's wonderful. Well, all right. Well, let's dig into that. What first got you interested in dance?
Oh, this is a hilarious story. Are you ready?
I am.
I had trained in gymnastics my whole life, and I broke my second bone, and my mother banned me from taking any more gymnastics. And so I needed something to do, and my friend invited me to a dance class. Isn't that great?
It is. That's great. How old were you when you then attended this dance class?
Yes, I was a lot older than most professional dancers. So I was 10.
Okay.
And I think I came in with a lot of flexibility from gymnastics, so I was able to jump in and take off. But at the same time, it's a very different age range. Most dancers start when they're quite young.
Mm-hmm. I love that we're talking about 10 being old in this industry. Okay, so you were the ancient age of 10. And so what was that like, starting as an old age as a dancer, and how did your career progress after that?
Yeah, great question. So I think being older, I could pick up things more quickly perhaps than the other girls in beginning ballet classes, but it also did not give me the same time that other dancers had in that foundational, putting down the basis of their technique. And so I would say it was a huge plus because I scaled through the levels very quickly. Mm-hmm. And then I scaled from beginning all the way up to level 3. And then I plateaued at level 3 because I had a bunch of gaps in my foundation. And so I took the next 2.5 to 3 years to be in that level and stayed there and worked on building the right foundation before progressing up to the top of the.
Mm-hmm. So I'm less familiar with the levels. So could you just describe briefly what does level 3 mean, and how do these levels progress. And what school were you studying at, if you don't mind?
Sure. I studied up in Michigan, and so it was the school called Turning Point School of Dance. It's now run by a very different director, but when I was working there, my director was Laura and Richard Furchet, and they had trained classically with Grand Rapids Ballet and Ballet Magnificat, and then came and started a school together once they got married.
Sure.
And so the levels are going to be different for each and every studio. And so for the studio that there was beginning ballet all the way up through level 6. And so level 3 would be that halfway point in the pre-professional career.
Okay.
But I fell in love with ballet. I would say I'm a perfectionist at heart. I work to get rid of the bad side of perfectionism, but keep the drive and love for pursuing excellence. And I love ballet because it was one thing I had to keep working at.
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't just win or lose. There was always more. I could always refine my craft more.
Mm-hmm.
I could always build more. I could always grow. There was no ceiling. I could always become better.
Yeah.
So that's why I fell in love with it.
Oh, good. What was it like being a dancer while going to school? So whether it be high school or I'm not sure how your dancing career overlapped with your college career, but at least high school wise, what was that like?
Sure. For me, it was a gift. I came from a very hard driving classical Midwestern family that's very traditional. The expectation is all A's. And so there's a lot of stress in school, and I didn't necessarily love it. I could perform and get the A's, but I didn't love it. And so to be able to have a creative outlet was my sanctuary. Mm-hmm. So someone might see my schedule in high school. She got up at 6, went to school by 7:30, was home by 2:30, did school, got some dinner and homework done, and then went to the dance studio at 4 and stayed till 9:30. A lot of people would be overwhelmed by that, but I didn't see it as work. It was my outlet from 4 to 9:30. Mm-hmm. And then I had to come home and do homework right till midnight. But it was my safe place.
Yeah.
The studio became my safe place.
Well, it's wonderful. So how long did your dance career last?
So I did do a year of traditional college. I went on scholarship to liberal arts university, both for academics and for dance, but I just transparently realized that I was not going to continue the academic route. Mm-hmm. I could get paid as a dancer right away, and so at 19 is when I stepped into being self-employed and started freelancing for contracts, and contracted all the way up to about, I think I was 24 years old when I had the injury. And so, contracted and was a professional for 5 years.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Okay, so for 19 to 24, so what was that like? Was there a particular, say, dance company that you were part of? Did you travel around? What was your schedule and your, what was that like for you?
Great question. I specifically chose a niche that I don't know how many people choose, and that is nonprofit dance. And it makes you think, what is that, right?
Yeah. Yes. What is nonprofit dance?
Well, nonprofit dance combines my heart for impact and my love for the arts. But what it looks like on a day-to-day is just like any other dance company. You come into the studio, you take a warm-up class to get your body ready, and then you rehearse the pieces you're putting together. I'd say the biggest difference is that, yes, we did ticketed shows that were in theaters, but we also did shows that we took into the community. And so we did both. We had commercial shows, and we had dance that we, I guess, pro bono or gifted into the community. And that looked like going into juvie, working with the girls in juvie. That looked like going into prisons and being a part of a recreational section for them, or going into schools and performing and bringing arts and culture into schools, going into nursing homes. And so it was a very well-rounded experience, but I loved the fact that I was able to take 5 years of my life, combine two passions for impact and creativeness and art. And the ability to express and create beauty. Combine that all together and do it in a way where I'm giving a gift into lower income populations that could never receive it.
That's wonderful. It's so you said you got injured at 24. What happened?
Yeah, so I was performing actually in a ticketed production. So I was on a stage and I was kicked in the head. And so that led to a pretty severe concussion, traumatic brain injury. They weren't quite sure where to draw the line, but the recovery time for that was 18 months. And I definitely went from athlete, living on my own, being self-employed, to having to move back in with my parents, allow them to take care of me in my mid-20s, let go of my ego because I couldn't do anything. I was in school at that time, working on a degree. I had to stop that. I had jobs and was working, had to stop that. There was no ability to do much more than heal. And so the next 18 months was a huge, huge, huge season of growing my character and learning what trial looks like and how you can use trial to be as much benefit and as much gain as good seasons.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by Napoleon Hill. I'm not sure if you know it, but this is the quote that got me through, and that within every adversity, there's a seed of equal or greater benefit for those with a positive mental mindset to actually harvest that seed. And so I was really just frankly upset with how the circumstances played out. I was so mad, and out of that anger and stubbornness, I was like, well, I'm going to find every last seed of benefit in this season. And what it became was a lot of character growth.
So that's a long time, 18 months, particularly for somebody as driven as you.
Yeah.
With this character growth, so how did that look like? Was it, joining different groups? Was it reading a lot? What were some of the things that really helped you resource-wise?
Yeah. So transparently, there was not much I could do. I couldn't read.
Okay.
I was unable to write, and I wasn't able to speak either. So those parts of my brain were damaged.
Oh, wow.
But
how long were you unable to speak or read?
About 8 months.
Okay.
So a traditional recovery time is 6 months. We had some complications, and so I was around 8 months. But I remember the day vividly that I was able to read again, and I'm a person of faith, and my faith is so important to me, and to not have been able to read the Bible when that was part of my daily life for my whole 24 years and not being able to read it again for 8 months, that was so hard. And I sat there for hours. I truly sat there for hours and just read and read and read and read and read the day that I could finally read again. But to answer your original question, how did I grow my character? The only part of my brain that was not damaged was the auditory system. And so I could listen. And so I downloaded podcast after podcast after podcast. I listened to books on tape, Audible books, anything that I could get my hands on. Just prior to the injury, I had gained some incredible favor with a philanthropist in a city nearby me here in Virginia. And she had started helping me understand what it was going to look like to create a great life where I could impact the way I wanted to. And one of her recommendations was to consume a lot of leadership and personal development content. And so the content I was consuming were books like books by Dale Carnegie, books by Tony Robbins, books by John Maxwell, podcasts that the philanthropist Sejal and her husband had recorded and I had gotten access to. But anything that was going to build a good mindset into me, that's what I was consuming. So that's how I spent the next 18 months. And I think, the greatest part of listening is in the application, right? 10% of what we take in is going to help us